time, but their time marches on. So with that bearing in mind that Tempest Fugit, the gentleman from Colorado, was recognized for his questions.
Well, I think the chairman, there are 9 Republican members of the Rules Committee that admonishment is probably best left for for our colleagues on the other side of the aisle who have been very verbose today. But nonetheless,
I used no time. Mr. Reschenthaler used no time. Ms. Fischbach used no time. So just bear that in mind.
Well, I appreciate that. Nonetheless, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. First and foremost, I guess I would just associate myself with the remarks of the ranking member DeLauro. In particular, I thought she gave an impassioned defense of the past 65 days. From my standpoint, I think it's shameful that it has taken 65 days since the Senate passed the National Security Supplemental on a bipartisan basis with 70 votes to get to this point, to finally be in a position in which we could consider individual component bills that largely resemble, with the exception of the sidecar, which we'll get to, the Senate bill, while our allies across the globe have been waiting for the Congress to act, waiting for House Republicans to act. Finally, we're poised to do so. And I'm disappointed that it's taken this long, but nonetheless, I'm grateful that we'll have, I hope, an opportunity to finally get this done in the next 48 hours. I do have some questions about the sidecar, and in particular the bill that Mr. Massey was, he covered a number of bills, but in particular one of the bills that he asked Chairman McCall about, the Repo Act. First and foremost, Ranking Member Meeks, how many bills are in this sidecar bill?
How many bills? There are, well, I can tell you there's no Democratic bills. I can tell you that.
Well, you've gotten to my second question. My understanding is there are 15 bills.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
15 bills that have been packaged into this sidecar agreement. None of them are Democratic bills. Chairman McCall, I have great respect for you, and we've enjoyed working with you, but I have to say I'm very disappointed that there isn't a single Democratic bill that the Republican leadership could not identify to put into this larger package, because I am aware of many bills that have passed your committee on a bipartisan basis that would merit inclusion.
One bill. There's one Democratic bill.
Can I respond?
Of course. By all means.
Every one of these bills is bipartisan.
Understood.
Has strong, and that was our litmus test, that we didn't want to put in. We weren't going to put a bill that was just a Republican bill. We picked bills that were bipartisan bills, and for a good reason. I mean, practically, you're not going to be able to pass it.
There are many bills within the package, Mr. Chairman, that I'm supportive of. My point is, each one of them are Republican-led bills. I understand they have broad bipartisan support, but I would just encourage you in the future. I mean, we have a number of issues, hotspots around the world. Your committee is deeply engaged in addressing those challenges, and I would just encourage the committee, because I know you and the ranking member have a productive and robust partnership, and I think it's important to include bills from the minority in a package like
and
this.
every time we have a markup, I give the ranking member, we pass Democrat-sponsored bills, and they're all sitting over there in the Senate. I wish they would pass the Democrat bills we passed out of my committee in the Senate as well. And
we'll talk to the Senate
has a bill on
about that,
data privacy that we included in there as well.
In any event, Repo Act. My question, Chairman McCall, I'm trying to understand your argument and the exchange you had with my colleague from Kentucky. So it's your position that you have structured that bill to limit President Biden because you believe that he won't enforce the provisions of the bill? That's your argument?
Because he has waived sanctions, including Nord Stream 2 and others, and we believe this issue is so important to protect our children from the threat of the PRC, we didn't want him to waive this provision. We wanted it enforced because he
Has President
if we
Biden
put a
opposed
waiver,
this bill?
it could pass, but he could choose not to enforce it.
Has he opposed it? Has the administration put out a statement on administration policy against the bill?
I don't.
The answer is no. The Biden administration has not opposed the bill. Part of my frustration, Mr. Chairman, just to, again, all candor here, is that I don't think it's an intellectually consistent argument to suggest that this president, President Biden, who has forcefully made the case against Russian aggression in Ukraine, that your fears are about his abilities or his capabilities to hold the line and not the former president's, which, of course, was the nature of my colleague's criticism from Kentucky.
When we were, and we had a similar bill in my committee, they were not very keen about this bill in the beginning.
Sure.
So I guess it's kind of a trust thing that we want it enforced, and we don't want to waiver that he will exercise like he's done on Nord Stream 2 and Iran and those. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, in response to Mr. Massey, who's not here now, but the financial markets understand the targeted nature of this action to address Russia's egregious and illegal behavior. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell testified to the Financial Services Committee that it will not undermine the dollar, and the U.S. Treasury Department is of the same view. I just wanted to clarify that.
Is the gentleman asking unanimous consent to place that into the record?
Yes, I am, sir.
Without objections ordered.
So it sounds like, Mr. Chairman, I think your answer was it's a trust issue, and that you have more trust. I guess your argument is you have more trust for former President Trump than President Biden?
I think that was an issue that's was raised by Mr. Massey about tying his hands and that sort of thing. But I just, you talking about repo or TikTok?
I'm talking about the Repo Act.
Okay.
I'm talking about the Repo Act because I am struggling to understand how a straight-faced argument could be made that that bill was constructed in a way to somehow limit President Biden's hands because you don't trust him to implement this policy as opposed to former President Trump.
It's not to be insulting to the president. It's just that we want this and we want this done. He does have a track record of waiving sanctions.
Sure. This is why
and he's done it several times. The Nord Stream was the most egregious one that we never thought a president would do that.
Okay, let me try to explain. I hear you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to explain my skepticism. The White House has not issued a statement of administration policy against the Repo Act. They have not given any indication that they won't forcefully implement the laws that we pass. The former president, although I don't know how he feels about this bill, but clearly his acolytes in the Congress vociferously oppose this bill because they believe that it will tie former President Trump's hands if he is elected president. So it's a tough argument for me to understand that you're making, that clearly all of his allies believe that you are doing this to tie his hands, not President Biden's, notwithstanding the argument that you're making today.
I appreciate your argument, but, why are you concerned about there not being a waiver if you believe the president won't waive it?
Oh, I'm not concerned about there not being a waiver.
Then what is the concern
I am concerned about you
If
making...
he's not going to waive it, then why
Correct.
do you care if there's a waiver there?
My concern is that you have made the reasoning, the impetus for that provision, apparently your belief that President Biden will somehow waive it when clearly that is not the case. Clearly the fear is that former President Trump...
There's no concern here, is there?
No concern from me. I'll tell you who the concern is from. Let me read you a tweet. This is from former President Trump's son. This was tweeted yesterday. It pains me to read this. These are not my words. Quote, why are these, again, it pains me, why are these GOP leadership losers like @Rep McCall pushing a bill that would do the bidding of Democrats and hurt my father's ability to negotiate an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine? That's his tweet. My point is simply that President Biden has been very clear about holding Russia accountable. And what I take great resentment at is the implication that somehow this Repo Act is being structured in a way to guard against mistrust of President Biden, when that's clearly not the case, nor is it the way anybody externally is reading the situation. Ranking Member Meeks, I'm welcome to expound on that if you...
Look, I agree with you. I mean, I have more concerns about President Trump, especially when it comes to Russia, because if you go by history. If I recall correctly, it was President Trump that had the Prime Minister of Russia in the White House showing him classified material. It was President Trump who just recently said to Russia, do what the hell you want to our allies. So clearly the concern would be on what President Trump would do with reference to his relationship with Russia. It is President Trump who said he trusts the information, the intelligence of Russia over the intelligence of the United States of America. Who are you going to trust? That's not President Biden. Those are the words of the former president of the United States. And you're going to trust him with Russia?
Well, I certainly agree. I support the Repo Act. I am glad that it has been included in that particular sidecar. And I just think it's important that we have honest, straightforward debate about the bills that we're considering and the reasons undermining them. I respect you, Mr. Chairman.
And can I just
Great
add,
deal.
this
Of course.
passed out of the Energy and Commerce Committee 40-2.
Right.
Pretty.
Very bipartisan bill.
It's a very,
And in the
by
Senate
a
as
very
well.
large margin.
Very much so. Yeah. And I'm hopeful.
And I'm not
that-
trying to tie anyone's hands. I mean,
I hear you.
I just think it's an important issue to protect our children from the communist China.
As do I. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.